I'm Rebecca Walsh, 38, diner manager by day, family ATM by night, professional forgiver by default. That's what happens when you're the stable one, the one who shows up, the one who answers every call at 2 a.m. with yes before you even know what they're asking. I've been bailing out my family since I was old enough to have a credit card they could max out. But this time I thought it was different. I thought saving a child, my own niece, would mean something. I thought $16,000 to fix a 9-year-old's spine would buy me a seat at the table, or at least a text message that said thank you. Instead, it bought me a locked door, a Ring camera notification, and a sister who could look straight into a lens and lie about doctor's orders while she hung streamers for a party I paid for but wasn't invited to. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The call came in late September, right in the middle of the dinner rush at Riverside Diner. I was elbow deep in inventory sheets, counting ketchup bottles like they mattered, when my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Diane, my older sister, the one who only called when she needed something or when she wanted to remind me why I should feel guilty for not needing her. I let it go to voicemail twice. The third time, I picked up. Her voice was shaking, that specific kind of shaking that's half genuine panic and half performance. The tone she'd perfected when we were kids, and she wanted Mom to believe I'd started the fight. "It's Emily," she said. "The scoliosis is worse. They said if we don't do the surgery now, by the time she's 12, her spine could collapse. She could end up in a wheelchair, Becca. Our baby could end up in a wheelchair." I heard Emily in the background, asking if they were talking about her. Diane shushed her. I stood there with a ballpoint pen in one hand and a phone pressed so hard against my ear it left a mark. "How much?" I asked. That's all I said. Not how is she, not what would doctors say, not can I come see her, just how much, because I already knew where this was going. Diane sucked in a breath like she hadn't expected me to cut to it so fast. $60,000 total, she said. Insurance will cover most of it, but we're short 16. We've been trying to save, but Kyle's business has been slow, and Trent already helped with the down payment for the consultation. She paused. "You're the only one left, Becca. You're the only one who can do this." I should have asked questions. I should have asked why Trent's contribution was called helping, but mine would inevitably be called saving the day. I should have asked if Kyle's business was always slow, but they still drove matching SUVs. I should have asked if they'd even looked into payment plans or medical loans or selling anything they owned. But I didn't ask any of that. Because Emily was 9. Because I remembered holding her the day she was born, tiny and red-faced, screaming like she was angry at the world for being so big and confusing. Because I was the aunt who showed up to every recital, every birthday, every science fair with a poster board I'd stayed up late decorating. Because I loved that kid more than I loved my own peace. "I'll do it," I said. Diane exhaled. "Oh my God, Becca, thank you. Thank you so much. You don't know what this means. We'll pay you back, I swear, the second Kyle's contract comes through." I didn't believe her. I never believed her, but I said okay anyway. I hung up and stared at the phone for a long time. My manager, Chloe, came around the corner holding a tray of dirty mugs and gave me a look. "You all right?" she asked. I nodded. "Yeah, just family stuff." She snorted. "When isn't it?" The $16,000 came from a settlement I got 2 years ago after some teenager ran a red light and T-boned my car at the intersection near the hardware store. I'd been on my way to pick up paint samples for my apartment, the little one-bedroom apartment I'd just signed a lease on after years of shared housing and couches that weren't mine. The impact sent me to the ER with a concussion, whiplash, and a fractured wrist that still ached when it rained. The other driver's insurance company dragged it out for 14 months before they finally offered a settlement. $18,000 after the lawyer took his cut. I used $2,000 to replace my car with something that didn't shake when I went over 45. The rest I kept in a separate account, labeled in my banking app as "Do Not Touch." It was supposed to be for emergencies, real emergencies, the kind that involved me, my survival, my future. But Emily's spine curving into a question mark felt more urgent than anything I could imagine needing. So I logged in, initiated the transfer, and watched that number drop to $712. The surgery was scheduled in mid-October at Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. Diane sent me updates like I was a distant relative who needed to be kept in the loop out of politeness. Pre-op went well. She's nervous but brave. We're heading in now. Pray for us. I didn't go to the hospital. I wasn't invited. I asked if I could come, if I could sit in the waiting room, bring Emily a stuffed animal or a book, anything. Diane said it was probably better if I didn't. The hospital's strict about visitors, she said, and Emily gets overwhelmed with too many people. We want to keep it calm. I believed her, because I wanted to believe that my sister wouldn't take $16,000 from me and then shut me out of the most terrifying day of her daughter's life. The surgery took 6 hours. I spent those 6 hours refreshing my phone, pacing my apartment, cleaning the bathroom grout with a toothbrush I didn't need to clean. When Diane finally texted, it was a group message. She made it through. Doctor says everything went perfectly. Thank you all for your prayers. I waited to see if there'd be a separate message for me. Something private. Something that acknowledged what I'd done. There wasn't. I told myself it was fine. She was exhausted. She'd thank me later. Emily was alive, and her spine was straight. That was enough. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Trent. You coming to the party? I stared at it. What party? The recovery party, he wrote back. This Saturday. Diane's doing a whole thing. Didn't she tell you? No, I said. She didn't. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Oh, well, it's at 2, at their place. You should come. I called Diane. It rang 4 times before she picked up, and I could hear music in the background. Laughter. The sound of people who weren't worried about anything. Hey, she said brightly. What's up? I heard you're having a party. For Emily? Yeah, Diane said. Just something small. She's been doing so well. We wanted to celebrate. She paused. It's kind of a family and close friends thing, Becca. We're keeping it low-key. I'm family, I said. My voice was calm, flat. I know, Diane said quickly, but Emily's still
recovering. The doctor said she needs to avoid stress. We're trying to keep it to just positive energy, People who are, lighter, easier. I stood in my kitchen holding the phone so tight my knuckles went white. Lighter, I repeated. Yeah, Diane said. You know what I mean. You've been kind of intense lately, and we just don't want anything to upset her. She's fragile right now. I paid for the surgery, I said. Diane went quiet. Then she sighed. I know, and we're grateful. So grateful. But this isn't about the money, Becca. It's about what's best for Emily. And right now, what's best is keeping things calm and simple. I'll send you pictures, okay? She hung up before I could answer. I stood there in my kitchen with the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the deadline. Then I sat down on the floor. Not dramatically, not crying, just sat, because my legs didn't feel like they could hold me anymore. I replayed the conversation in my head. Intense. Lighter. Positive energy. Doctor's orders. I thought about every time I'd shown up. Every birthday, every holiday, every moment I rearranged my life to be present for people who apparently found my presence too heavy to bear. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my back to hurt, long enough for the sun to move across the kitchen tile. Then I heard a knock. Not at my door.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story.
At the screen door that led to the back stairs. I got up slowly, looked through the glass. It was Uncle George, my dad's older brother. 67, silver-haired, hands that shook just slightly when he held them still. He'd been staying with me for 3 months, ever since the family decided his house was too much for him to manage alone. He was supposed to go into assisted living. Diane had even collected the deposit from him, $5,000. That was in July. It was now late October, and George was still sleeping on my pull-out couch. I opened the door. He was holding 2 grocery bags. Got us some soup, he said. The good kind, not the canned stuff. I stepped aside and let him in. He set the bags on the counter, started unpacking slowly. His hands fumbled with the bag ties. Heard you on the phone, he said quietly.
Wasn't trying to listen. Walls are thin. I leaned against the counter. They uninvited me from Emily's party. George paused, looked at me. You're the one who paid for the surgery. I nodded. He shook his head, went back to unpacking. That sounds about right. We made soup together. He chopped carrots with the patience of someone who'd learned not to rush his own hands. I boiled water, measured out rice, tried not to think about my sister's voice saying, later. We ate at my small kitchen table, the one that wobbled if you leaned on the left side. George finished his bowl, set down his spoon. You know they took my deposit, he said, for the assisted living. I looked up. What? $5,000, he said. Diane said she'd hold on to it until the room was ready. That was 4 months ago. Every time I ask, she says it's still being processed. But I called the facility last week. They said they never received anything. Something cold settled in my chest. Where's the money, George? He shrugged. I don't know, but I saw Kyle driving a new truck last month, and Vanessa posted pictures from some resort in Myrtle Beach. I'm not saying it's connected. I'm just saying the math doesn't math. I stared at my soup. It had gone cold. You think they spent it? I think, George said carefully, that your sister is very good at making people feel selfish for asking questions. And I think you just gave them $16,000 they're never going to pay back. And I think that party they're throwing isn't about Emily recovering. I think it's about something else. I pushed my bowl away. What are you saying? I'm saying, George said, leaning forward, that if I were you, I'd want to know what I actually paid for, and I'd want to know why I'm not welcome to see it. I drove to Diana's house the next morning, not to confront her, not to demand entry to a party I wasn't invited to, just to see, just to understand what $16,000 and a lifetime of showing up had actually bought me. The house sat at the end of Maple Street, a 2-story colonial with black shutters and a front porch that Diane had decorated every season like she was auditioning for a home and garden magazine. It was just past 9 in the morning, early enough that I figured they'd still be inside, late enough that I wouldn't look like a complete stalker. I parked 3 houses down across the street under the shade of an old oak tree that probably had been there since before any of us were born. I turned the engine off and sat. My hands were steady on the wheel. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't crying. I was just there, watching. The way you watch a house you used to know and wonder when it became unfamiliar. The front door opened. Kyle came out first, carrying a folding table under one arm and a box under the other. He was wearing cargo shorts, even though it was 50 degrees outside, and a polo shirt with his company logo on it. Some contracting business that was always 6 months away from the big break that never came. He set the table down on the lawn, went back inside. Then came Trent, my younger brother. 35, but still moving like he was in college. All loose limbs and easy confidence. He was carrying a cooler, the big, expensive kind you take to tailgates. He said something over his shoulder and laughed. Vanessa came out behind him, his wife. Blonde hair and a high ponytail, wearing yoga pants and an oversized sweatshirt that said Mama Bear in glitter letters. She was carrying a poster board. I couldn't read what it said from where I sat, but it was decorated with balloons and stars. I watched them move back and forth, setting up tables, stringing lights across the porch railing, unloading bags from the back of Kyle's new truck, the truck George mentioned, navy blue, still shiny, with temporary plates in the back window. I pulled out my phone and took a picture. I didn't know why yet, just that I might need it. Diane finally came out. She was wearing a cream-colored sweater and jeans that looked new, the kind that didn't have any worn spots or faded knees. Her hair was curled. She was holding a clipboard. A clipboard. Like this was an event that required management. She gestured toward the folding table, said something to Kyle. He moved it 3 feet to the left. I zoomed in with my phone camera and took another picture. Then I noticed the banner. It was stretched across the top of the porch, tied to the gutters on either side. Big block letters, in pink and gold. Emily's Miracle Recovery Fund. Thank you for your support. I read it twice. Fund. Not party. Fund. I took another picture. My hands still weren't shaking. I felt weirdly calm, like I'd stepped outside my own body and was watching someone else sit in this car, someone else realize they'd been lied to. I opened my messages and texted Trent. Hey, what time does the party start again? He responded within a minute. 2:00. You coming? Didn't think Diane invited you.
I typed. Just curious what I'm missing. 3 dots. Then, nothing. He didn't respond. I sat there for another 20 minutes, watched them set up a donation jar on one of the tables, watched Vanessa tape a printed sign to the front of it.
I couldn't read the sign from where I was, but I could guess. I put my car in drive and pulled away slowly, careful not to draw attention. I needed to think. I needed to figure out what I was actually looking at. I drove to the diner, even though it was my day off. Chloe was behind the counter, refilling the napkin dispensers. She looked up when I walked in. "You look like you need coffee," she said. I sat down at the counter. "I need to ask you something." She poured me a cup without asking how I took it. She already knew. Black, no sugar. "Shoot," she said. "If someone threw a fundraiser," I said slowly, "after you already paid for the thing they're raising funds for, what would you call that?" Chloe stopped mid-pour. She set the coffee pot down. "I'd call that fraud." I nodded. "That's what I thought." She leaned against the counter. "What did your family do now?" I told her. All of it. The $16,000, the surgery, the party I wasn't invited to, the banner that said fund. Chloe listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You got proof?" "Proof of what?" I asked. "That you paid? That they said insurance covered the rest? That they're collecting money for something that's already paid for?" I thought about it. I had the bank transfer. I had text messages from Diane thanking me. Vague ones, but still. I had the group text after the surgery. I didn't have proof they were lying about insurance. I didn't have proof they were pocketing donations. But I had enough to ask questions. Chloe pulled out her phone. "You know what you need," she said. "You need to go to that party." "I can't," I said. "I'm not invited." She gave me a look. "Since when has that stopped anyone? You walk in, you smile, you take pictures. You see who's donating, you see what they're saying, and then you decide what to do with it." I stared at my coffee. Chloe reached across the counter and tapped the back of my hand. "Your family's been using you as a doormat since before I met you," she said. "At some point, Becca, you gotta stop lying down." I went home. Uncle George was in the living room, sitting in the recliner I'd bought at a yard sale 3 years ago. He was watching a nature documentary with the volume too loud, the way he always did. I sat down on the couch. He glanced over. "You figure it out yet?" he asked. "Figure what out?" "What you're gonna do?" I shook my head. George muted the TV. "Let me tell you something," he said. "When your Aunt Patty died, God rest her, I found out she'd been lending your father money for years. Thousands of dollars. Never told me. Never asked me. Just gave it to him every time he called. You know why?" I waited. "Because she thought if she kept giving, eventually he'd see her as someone worth keeping around. Someone he needed. But all it did was teach him she'd always say yes, so he never stopped asking. And she never stopped giving, even when we couldn't afford it. Even when it hurt." He looked at me. "You're doing the same thing." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say it wasn't the same. Emily needed that surgery. But George just turned the volume back up and went back to a show. I sat there for a while, thinking about Aunt Patty. I barely remembered her. Just a quiet woman who made dense lemon cake and never spoke up at family dinners. She died when I was 14. I didn't even know she'd been giving Dad money. Nobody ever talked about it. I wondered what else nobody talked about. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Found the transaction from September. $16,000 to Diane Brennan. Memo line for Emily. I screenshot it. Then I went into my messages and started scrolling. Found the text where Diane first asked. Found the one where she promised to pay me back. Found the group message after the surgery. I screenshot all of them. I didn't know what I was building yet, but I was building something. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my mom. She lived in Florida now, remarried to a man named Carl who sold timeshares and talked too loud. She'd moved down there 6 years ago, and we'd talk maybe twice a year. Christmas and her birthday, sometimes not even that. She picked up on the third ring. "Rebecca?" Her voice was surprised. I never called her. "Yeah," I said. "Hi, Mom. Is everything okay?" She always asked that, like the only reason I'd call was if something was wrong. "I need to ask you something," I said.
About Diane. There was a pause. What about her? Did you know she's throwing a fundraiser for Emily's surgery? Mom hesitated. I heard something about a party, she said, carefully. Why? Did you know I paid for the surgery? Another pause, longer this time. You did. $16,000, I said, in September. Diane told me insurance didn't cover enough. Mom was quiet. Then she said, she told me the same thing, said they were struggling to come up with the money. I felt something tighten in my chest. Did you give her anything? A little, Mom said. Not much, maybe $1,200. She said every bit helped. I closed my eyes. Mom, she's collecting donations today, at the house, for a surgery that's already paid for? Mom didn't say anything for a long time. Then, why would she do that? I don't know, I said, but I'm going to find out. Rebecca, Mom said, her voice shifting into that warning tone I knew too well. Don't start something. She's your sister. She's a liar, I said. The words came out harder than I meant them to. Mom sighed. You've always been so black and white. People make mistakes. This isn't a mistake, I said. This is calculated. There was a long silence. Then Mom said, if you go after her, you're going to tear this family apart. I laughed. It was a short, bitter sound. What family, Mom? The one that uninvited me from a party I funded? The one that takes and never once asks if I'm okay? Mom's voice went cold. I don't know what you want me to say. Then don't say anything, I said. And I hung up. I sat there staring at my phone. My hands were shaking now. Not from fear. From something else. Something that felt like waking up. George walked into the room. Heard that? Good, I said. He sat down next to me on the couch. His hands were folded in his lap. When I was your age, I had a boss who kept shorting my paychecks. Just a little. $20 here, 30 there. I didn't say anything because I needed the job. Figured it wasn't worth the fight. You know what happened? I looked at him. He kept doing it. Because I let him. Because silence is permission. He looked at me. You gonna stay silent? I thought about Emily. I thought about her tiny face the day she was born. The way she used to grab my finger when I held her. The gap in her teeth when she smiled. The scoliosis brace she had to wear for 2 years before the surgery. How she'd cried the first time they fitted her for it.
I'd been the one to take her for ice cream after, not Diane. I'd been the one who showed up. And now I wasn't even allowed to celebrate her recovery. Not because Emily didn't want me there, but because my presence reminded Diane of what she owed, of what she'd taken, of what she was still taking. No, I said. I'm not staying silent. George nodded. Good. Then let's get ready. For what? I asked. He stood up, his knees cracking. For the party. You're going, and I'm going with you. I pulled into Diane's driveway at exactly 2:15, not 2 o'clock. I didn't want to be early. I wanted people there, witnesses. George sat in the passenger seat wearing a button-up shirt I had ironed for him that morning, and his good shoes, the ones he saved for funerals and court dates. You ready? He asked. No, I said. He smiled. Good. That means you're paying attention. We got out of the car. The front yard was full. Maybe 30 people scattered across the lawn holding paper plates and plastic cups. Kids running around with streamers. Music playing from a portable speaker someone had set up near the porch. I recognized some of the faces. Neighbors, a few people from Diane's church, Kyle's business partner Patrick standing near the grill with a beer in his hand. And there, sitting in a lawn chair near the front door, was Emily. She was wearing a pink dress and a small back brace, the kind she'd have to wear for the next few months while her spine healed. Her hair was in 2 braids. She looked tiny, fragile. But she was smiling, laughing at something Vanessa's daughter had just said. I felt my chest tighten. This was the first time I'd seen her since before the surgery. Diane saw me before I made it halfway across the lawn. Her face changed. Not angry. Worse, surprised. Like she genuinely didn't think I'd show up. She walked toward me quickly, heels sinking slightly into the grass. "Rebecca," she said. Her voice was bright but strained. "I didn't think you were coming." "You didn't invite me," I said. I kept my voice even, calm. She glanced at George, then back at me. "Well, you're here now." She forced a smile. "There's food on the table. Help yourself." I didn't move toward the food. I looked past her at the banner, at the donation jar, at the poster board Vanessa had set up with pictures of Emily in the hospital, captions underneath that said things like, "Our miracle girl," and "Thank you for helping us through this." Diane followed my gaze. Her smile faltered. "It's been overwhelming," she said quickly. "The support. People have been so generous." "How much have you raised?" I asked. She blinked. "What?" "How much?" I repeated. She laughed. A nervous, high-pitched sound. "I don't know. I haven't counted yet. We just wanted to do something to thank everyone who helped." I nodded slowly. Everyone who helped. Like me. Diane's face flushed. "Of course, like you. You know we're grateful." "Do I?" I asked. "Because I paid $16,000 and got uninvited from this?" Diane's eyes darted around. People were starting to glance over. "Lower your voice," she hissed. "Why?" I asked. I kept my tone calm, friendly even. "Are you worried people might hear that the surgery's already paid for?" Her face went pale. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone, pulled up the screenshot of the bank transfer, held it out so she could see. "September 18th, I said. $16,000 sent directly to you for Emily's surgery. You told me insurance didn't cover enough. You told me you were short. So I gave you everything I had." Diane's mouth opened, closed. She looked at the phone like it was a snake. "That was," she started, "that was for the surgery." "Right," I said. "So why are you collecting more money?" She swallowed. "Because there are other expenses, recovery costs, physical therapy, medications." I nodded. "How much does insurance cover for that?" She didn't answer. "Diane," I said, "how much does insurance cover?" "Enough," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Then why the fundraiser?" I asked. She stared at me. I could see her trying to spin it, but she couldn't. Not with me standing there holding proof, not with George beside me watching her like a judge at sentencing. Trent walked over. His smile was easy, casual. "Hey, Becca, glad you made it." I turned to him. "Did you know?" He frowned. "Know what?" "That I paid for the surgery. That Diane's collecting money for something that's already covered." His smile disappeared. He looked at Diane. She looked away. Trent's jaw tightened. "You said you needed help with the deposit," he said to Diane. "You said insurance was only covering part of it." "It was," Diane said quickly, "but things changed." "Things changed," I repeated. "When?" "After I sent you $16,000, or after you realized you could get more?" Kyle walked over. He was holding a spatula and wearing an apron that said Grill Master. His face was red, not from the heat, from anger. "What's going on here?" he asked. His voice was loud enough that half the yard turned to look. I held up my phone again. "Your wife took $16,000 from me for a surgery that insurance apparently covered. Now she's collecting donations for expenses she won't specify. I want to know where the money's going." Kyle's face got redder. "You're making a scene." "I'm asking a question," I said. He stepped closer. "You need to leave. This is a private party." "Private?" I said. "You sent invitations to half the neighborhood. You posted about it on social media. You put up a donation jar. Nothing about this is private." Emily's voice cut through the tension. "Aunt Becca?"
I turned. She was standing now, holding onto the arm of her chair. Her face was confused, scared. Why is everyone yelling? My heart cracked. I walked over to her, knelt down so we were eye level. "Hey, sweetheart," I said. I kept my voice soft. "How are you feeling?" She looked at me, then at Diane, then back at me. "I'm okay," she said quietly. "My back hurts sometimes, but I'm okay. I'm so glad. I missed you." She looked down. "I missed you too. Why didn't you come to the hospital?" I glanced up at Diane. She was staring at me, her expression unreadable. "I wanted to," I said to Emily, "but your mom thought it was better if I didn't." Emily frowned. "She said you were too busy." Something cold settled in my stomach. "I was never too busy for you." Diane's voice cut in. "Emily, go inside. Sweetheart, go inside right now." "But Mom," Emily started. "Now," Diane said. Her voice was sharp. Emily flinched. George stepped forward and held his hand to Emily. "Come on, kiddo. Let's go get you some cake." Emily looked at him, then at me. I nodded. "It's okay. Go with Uncle George." She took his hand. He led her toward the house, moving slowly so she didn't have to rush. The yard was silent now. Everyone was watching. Diane's face was a mask of barely controlled fury. "You had no right," she said. "No right to what?" I asked. "To come here and humiliate me?" I stood up, brushed the grass off my knees. "I didn't humiliate you. You did that yourself." Kyle stepped between us. "Get out," he said, "or I'm calling the cops." "For what?"
Asked. "Trespassing. This is a private event. You weren't invited." I looked around the yard, at the neighbors, at the church people, at Patrick standing there with his mouth half open. "Then call them," I said. "I'll wait. And when they get here, I'll show them my bank records. I'll show them your fundraiser, and we'll let them decide if there's a crime being committed." Kyle's hand twitched toward his pocket, toward his phone, but he didn't pull it out. Diane grabbed his arm. "Don't," she said, "just don't." She looked at me. "Fine, you want to know?" Kyle's business went under. We're 3 months behind on the mortgage. We needed the money, not for Emily, for us. The yard was so quiet I could hear the music still playing from the speaker. Some pop song I didn't recognize. I stared at her. "You lied to me," I said. My voice was flat. She didn't deny it. "You took $16,000 from me. You told me it was for your daughter's surgery, and you spent it on yourselves." Diane's eyes filled with tears. "We were desperate. We were going to lose the house. I had nowhere else to turn." "So you turned to me?" I said, "like you always do." She wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her cheek. "You don't understand what it's like to be struggling, to have people depending on you." I laughed. It was a sharp, humorless sound. "I don't understand? I've been struggling my entire life. I've been the one people depend on since I was 16 years old. And I still showed up. I still helped because I thought it mattered. I thought you'd do the same for me." Diane looked away. Trent shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa stared at the ground. I looked around at all of them, at the people who'd taken and never once asked what it cost me. My voice was steady when I spoke. "I want my money back. All of it. You have 2 weeks." Diane's head snapped up. "We don't have it." "Then get it," I said. "Sell the truck. Cancel your cable. I don't care. But you're going to pay me back. Every cent. Or I'm filing a police report for fraud. And I'm going to make sure everyone here knows exactly what you did." Kyle's face twisted. "You wouldn't." "Try me," I said. I pulled out my phone again, started typing. "What are you doing?" Diane asked. Her voice was panicked. "I'm making a post," I said, tagging everyone who donated today, letting them know where their money actually went. Diane lunged forward, grabbed my wrist. "Don't, please." I looked at her hand on my wrist, then at her face. She was crying now, really crying. Not the performative kind, the desperate kind. I pulled my arm free. "You had 2 weeks," I said. "After that, I'm done being quiet." I left the party with Uncle George beside me, walking slowly across the lawn while 30 pairs of eyes followed us to the car. Nobody said goodbye.
Nobody tried to stop us. The music kept playing, some cheerful pop song that felt obscene against the silence we left behind. I could hear Diane's voice rising as we reached the driveway, trying to explain, trying to spin it into something that didn't make her look like exactly what she was. George opened the passenger door and lowered himself in carefully, his hands gripping the frame for support. I slid into the driver's seat and sat there for a moment, key in the ignition but not turning it. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were completely still. That scared me more than the shaking had. George looked over at me. "You did good back there," he said quietly. I didn't feel good. I felt hollow, like I had just burned down a building I used to live in and now had nowhere to go back to. I started the car. The engine turned over with its usual rattle. I needed to get that looked at. I needed to do a lot of things. But right now, I just needed to leave before Diane came running after me with more excuses, more tears, more reasons why I should forgive her and pretend this never happened. We drove in silence for the first few minutes. The streets of Millbrook passed by in that late afternoon light that makes everything look softer than it actually is. Brick buildings and corner stores and the old movie theater that had been closed for 3 years, but still had the marquee up, advertising a film nobody remembered. George cleared his throat. "You know they're not going to pay you back." "I know," I said. "So what's the plan?" I glanced at him. "What makes you think I have a plan?" "Because you're your father's daughter," George said, "and he never did anything without 3 backup plans and a way out. I'd never thought of myself as being like my father. Dad died when I was 19. Heart attack in the driveway while he was loading groceries. Quick and sudden and so mundane it felt almost insulting. He'd been a contractor, same as Kyle pretended to be, except Dad actually finished jobs. He was tough, demanding, the kind of man who believed in earning respect through competence, not charm. I hadn't thought about him in months, maybe longer. George was still looking at me. You got that same look he used to get when someone crossed him, like you were doing math in your head, calculating exactly how much it was going to cost them. I pulled into the parking lot of Riverside Diner. Chloe's car was still there, parked in her usual spot near the dumpster. I turned off the engine. I need to make some calls, I said. George nodded. I'll get us coffee. He got out slowly, made his way toward the door. I watched him go, this old man with trembling hands who'd been screwed over by the same people who screwed me over, and I felt something harden in my chest, something that had been soft for too long. I pulled out my phone and opened my photos, scrolled back to the pictures I had taken that morning. The banner, the donation jar, the new truck. I screenshot each one and saved them to a folder labeled Evidence. Then I opened my email. The first email went to Lauren, Diane's best friend, the one who'd been at the party, standing near the food table with a plate of pasta salad and a carefully neutral expression while I confronted her best friend in front of God and everyone. Lauren worked at the hospital, not Children's Hospital where Emily had her surgery, but she'd know people. She'd have access to information. I kept the email short. Lauren, it's Becca. I need to know if Diane filed any hardship paperwork with the hospital for Emily's surgery. I also need to know what insurance actually covered. I know you don't owe me anything, but if you ever cared about the truth, now would be the time to show it. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. The second email went to my own insurance company. I'd had the same provider for 6 years, auto and rental insurance bundled together. I explained that I'd given a family member a significant amount of money for a medical procedure and needed documentation of my payment in case of legal proceedings. I asked if they had any resources for victims of financial fraud within families. It was a long shot, but I needed to cover every base. The third email went to someone I hadn't spoken to in 4 years, my ex-boyfriend Justin. He was a paralegal now, working for a firm in Pittsburgh
Specialized in family law. We'd ended things amicably enough, just 2 people who wanted different futures and were honest enough to admit it. I explained the situation in bullet points. He'd always preferred information that way, clean and organized. I asked if he knew anyone who handled financial elder abuse cases, since George's situation was tangled up in all of this too. I asked if fraud between family members was prosecutable or just a civil matter. I didn't ask him to help me, just to point me in the right direction. George came back out with 2 coffees in paper cups and a bag that smelled like Chloe's banana bread. He handed me a cup and settled back into his seat. Chloe says hi, he reported. Says if you need someone to testify about how many times Diane's called the diner asking if you were working so she could avoid running into you, she's got a list. I smiled despite myself. Of course she does. George pulled a piece of banana bread from the bag and took a bite. So what now? He asked. Now we wait, I said. For what? For them to make the next move. I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 6:30 that evening. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. I picked up. Hello? There was a pause. Then a woman's voice. Quiet and rushed. Becca? It's Lauren. I sat up straighter. I was at home by then, curled up on the couch with my laptop open and a notebook beside me. George was in the kitchen making tea, the kettle starting to whistle. Lauren, I said. Thanks for calling. She let out a shaky breath. I can't believe I'm doing this. I shouldn't be doing this, but what Diane did today, what she's been doing, it's not right. I waited, didn't push, gave her space to get there on her own. I looked into it, Lauren continued, called a friend who works in billing at Children's. Emily's surgery was covered almost entirely by insurance. They paid $58,000 of the $60,000 total. The family's out-of-pocket maximum was $2,000. Not 16, 2. I closed my eyes, felt something twist in my stomach. So the 16 I gave her, I started, was pure profit, Lauren finished. She lied to you. And she lied to everyone else who donated today. I'm so sorry, Becca. I didn't know. If I'd known, I would have said something. I believed her. Lauren had always been the moral center of Diane's friend group, the one who called people out when they were being cruel or unfair. I should have reached out to her sooner. Do you have any documentation? I asked. Anything that shows what insurance covered? Lauren hesitated. I took a picture of the billing summary. If I send it to you, you can't say where you got it. I could lose my job. I won't, I promised. You have my word. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm texting it now. And Becca? Yeah? She paused. Get your money back. Diane's been pulling this kind of thing for years. Someone needs to stop her. The text came through 30 seconds after we hung up. A photo of a hospital billing statement. Patient name, Emily Brennan. Total charges, $60,112. Insurance paid $58,112. Patient responsibility, $2,000. Status, paid in full. I stared at it, read it 3 times. Paid in full. The $2,000 had already been covered. Maybe by insurance, maybe by Diane and Kyle, but it was done, closed. There was no outstanding balance, no financial hardship. No reason for me to have given them $16,000 except that my sister was a liar, and I was too trusting to question her lies. George peered in the doorway holding 2 mugs of tea. He set one down on the coffee table in front of me. You look like you just got bad news. Worse, I said. I got proof. I turned the laptop so he could see. He squinted at the screen, reading slowly. Then he sat down heavily in the recliner. Well, he said, that's that, then. That's that, I repeated. We sat in silence for a while, drinking tea that was too hot and tasted like nothing. Finally, George spoke. What are you going to do with it? I don't know yet, I said, but I'm keeping it. I spent the rest of that night building a file. Every text message, every email, every bank record. I logged into my account and downloaded 6 months of statements. I printed everything, hole-punched it, put it in a 3-ring binder with labeled tabs: communication, financial records, medical documentation, witness statements. I wasn't sure what I was building yet. A legal case? An insurance fraud report? A social media post that would burn Diane's reputation to ash? I just knew everything organized, everything airtight. Because if I was going to do this, if I was actually going to follow through, I couldn't leave any room for doubt. At 11 o'clock, my phone buzzed. A text from Trent. We need to talk. I stared at it. Didn't respond. Another text. Diane's a mess. She's been crying for hours. Kyle's threatening to leave her. You got what you wanted. Can you just let it go? I typed back slowly. I want my $16,000. That's what I want. 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, we don't have it. Not my problem, I wrote. You helped spend it. Figure it out. The dots appeared one more time, then stopped. He didn't text again. I tried to sleep but couldn't. My brain kept cycling through the same thoughts over and over. How long had Diane been planning this? Had she known from the beginning that insurance would cover almost everything? Had she targeted me specifically because she knew I'd just gotten the settlement money? Or was it opportunistic, something she decided to do once she realized how easy it was to lie to me? I thought about all the times over the years she'd asked for help. Small amounts mostly. 100 here, 50 there, gas money, grocery money. Can you cover this bill until Kyle's check comes through? I'd always said yes. Always believed her when she said she'd pay me back. I can't remember a single time she actually had. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls. 12 from Diane, 3 from Trent, 2 from numbers I didn't recognize. There were also 34 text messages, all variations of the same theme. Please call me. We need to talk. You're tearing this family apart. This isn't fair. Emily's asking about you. How could you do this? I read through them all without responding. Then I blocked Diane's number, blocked Trent's too. I kept my phone on, but I wasn't going to spend my day fielding their panic and guilt trips. I had work at the diner. Sunday breakfast shift, the busiest one of the week. I got there at 6, tied on my apron, smiled at the regulars who always sat in the same booths and ordered the same meals. It felt good to move through something familiar and routine, pouring coffee, taking orders, wiping down tables, small things. Things that had nothing to do with betrayal or missing money or sisters who looked you in the eye and lied to you. Chloe cornered me during the lull between breakfast and lunch. She pulled me into the back office, shut the door.
Whole town's talking about it. I leaned against the desk. What are they saying? She shrugged. Depends who you ask. Half of them think you're a hero for calling her out. Other half thinks you're cruel for embarrassing her in front of everyone. I nodded. Sounds about right. Chloe crossed her arms. What do you think? I think, I said slowly, that I don't care what they think. For the first time in my life, I really don't. She studied me for a moment, then she smiled. Good, about time. My phone rang again during my break. Another unknown number. I answered it this time, figuring if it was Diane calling from someone else's phone, I'd just hang up. Hello? Is this Rebecca Walsh? A man's voice asked. Yes, I said. Who's this? My name is David Cardwell. I'm an attorney with Henderson and Associates in Pittsburgh. Your name was passed along to me by Justin Mora. He said you might need legal counsel regarding a family financial matter. I straightened up. Yes, I do. He asked me to explain a situation. I did, clearly and without emotion. The $16,000, the surgery that was already covered, the fundraiser, the lies. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Do you have documentation? He asked. All of it, I said. Bank transfers, text messages, billing records, photographs. Good, he said. That's good. What you're describing could potentially be prosecuted as theft by deception or fraud. It might also qualify as financial exploitation, particularly given that you mentioned an elderly relative was involved as well. Can I ask, are you interested in pursuing criminal charges, or are you primarily looking to recover your money? I hesitated. What's the difference? Criminal charges mean involving law enforcement and potentially seeing your sister face jail time and a criminal record. Civil action means suing for the return of your funds plus any associated costs, but no criminal penalties. It's slower, but often more effective for actually getting your money back. Both, I said. The word came out before I'd fully thought it through, but once I said it, I knew it was right. I want both. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I understand this is personal, Mr. Cardwell said carefully, but I want to make sure you're prepared for what that means. Pursuing both avenues will be expensive, time-consuming, and it will likely destroy whatever remains of your relationship with your family. Are you certain that's what you want? I thought about Emily asking why I hadn't come to the hospital. I thought about Uncle George's $5,000 that no one would talk about. I thought about my mother's voice on the phone telling me not to start something. I thought about $16,000 I'd saved by skipping meals and working double shifts and driving a car that shook when it went over 45. Yes, I said, I'm certain. All right then, he said, I'll send over a retainer agreement. We'll start with a demand letter to your sister and her husband. Give them one final opportunity to return the funds before we escalate. If they refuse or ignore it, we'll file in civil court and I'll walk you through the process of making a police report. Does that work for you? That works, I said. One more thing, he added. This is going to get ugly. They're going to say things about you, claim you're vindictive or mentally unstable, or that you're misremembering the facts. They'll try to make you the villain. You need to be ready for that. I've been the villain in their story my whole life, I said. This is just the first time I'm okay with it. I hung up and sat there in the diner office for a long time. The sounds of the restaurant filtered through the door. Dishes clattering, the hiss of the grill, someone laughing at something. Normal life continuing while mine was being dismantled and rebuilt into something I didn't recognize yet. Chloe knocked and poked her head in. You okay? Yeah, I said. I think I am. She looked at me like she didn't quite believe me, but was willing to let it slide. Table 6 needs a refill when you're ready. I stood up, smoothed my apron. Okay, let's go. The demand letter arrived at Diane's house on Wednesday. I know because Trent called me from yet another new number, this one with a voicemail that was 80% shouting and 20% desperation. A lawyer, Becca? You sent a lawyer after your own sister? You're really going to sue her? Over money? Yes, I texted back. Over $16,000. That's not just money. That's my entire savings. That's 2 years of my life. And she stole it. He didn't respond after that. But an hour later, I got a call from a number that showed up as Diane Brennan. I answered it. Put it on speaker so George could hear from where he sat doing a crossword puzzle at the kitchen table. Becca, Diane's voice was raw, strained. Please don't do this. Do what? I asked. My voice was calm, almost pleasant. Sue me. Destroy my life. You already responded to the demand letter, I asked. Kyle did. He told the lawyer we'd pay you back. We just need time. How much time? I don't know, she said. A year? Maybe 2? I laughed. It wasn't kind. 2 years? Diane, you had 2 weeks. You haven't paid me a cent. You haven't even apologized. I did apologize, she said quickly. At the party. I said I was sorry. No, I corrected. You said you were desperate. That's not an apology. That's an excuse. She was crying now. I could hear it in her breathing. What do you want from me? She asked. I want $16,000, I said, in full by the end of the month. And I want you to return every donation from that fundraiser to the people who gave it. She went silent. Then, I can't do that. Then I'll see you in court, I said. Becca, she said, her voice breaking. I'm your sister. You were, I said, and I hung up. George looked up from his crossword. You really going through with this? All the way, I said. He nodded slowly. Then I'm with you, whatever you need. That night I couldn't sleep again, but this time it wasn't because of anxiety or regret. It was because my mind was working, planning. I kept thinking about what David Cardwell had said, that this was going to get ugly, that they'd try to make me the villain. I realized I needed to get ahead of that. I needed to control the narrative before they did. So, at 2 a.m, sitting in my darkened living room with only the glow of my laptop screen, I started writing. Not a social media post. Something bigger. I wrote everything. The settlement money from the car accident, the call from Diane about Emily's surgery, the $16,000 transfer, the party I wasn't invited to, the banner that said fund, the billing records that showed insurance had covered almost everything, Uncle George's missing $5,000, the demand letter, all of it. I wrote it like a story. Clear, factual, without exaggeration or dramatics. Just the truth, laid out in a way anyone could understand. When I finished, it was 4 a.m, and the document was 11 pages long. I read through it twice, made some edits, checked every fact against my documentation.
Then I saved it. I wasn't ready to publish it yet, but I would be. Soon. George shuffled out of his room around 6, found me still at the laptop. You been up all night? He asked. Yeah, I said, writing. He poured himself a glass of water, stood there looking at me. Your dad used to do that, he said. When he was working through a problem, he'd stay up all night just thinking, driving your mom crazy. Did it work? I asked. Usually, George said. But it also meant when he made a decision, he'd already thought through every angle. Couldn't talk him out of it. Sounds familiar, I said. He smiled. That's what I'm counting on. The lawsuit was filed on October 28th. David Cardwell called me that afternoon to confirm the papers had been served. Diane and Kyle had been handed the complaint at their home by a process server who'd caught them coming back from the grocery store. He said Diane had gone pale when she read the first page. Kyle had tried to argue with the server, claiming it was harassment, but the papers were legal and binding. They had 30 days to respond or I'd win by default. That same day, I filed a police report for theft by deception. The officer who took my statement was a woman in her 40s named Lieutenant Brennan, no relation, who listened to everything with the kind of patient attention that made me think she'd heard stories like this before. She took copies of all my documentation, the bank transfers, the text messages, the billing records Lauren had sent me, the photographs from the fundraiser. She asked questions that were direct, but not unkind. Had I given the money willingly? Yes. Had I been told what it was for? Yes, the surgery. Had I later discovered that was false? Yes. Did I have proof the money was used for other purposes? Not direct proof, but I had the billing records showing the surgery was already covered, and I had Kyle's new truck, purchased 2 weeks after I sent the money. She wrote all of it down in her report with careful handwriting that slanted slightly to the left. "This is going to take time," she told me. "Financial crimes aren't high priority unless there's a significant amount of money involved or a vulnerable victim. You've got both here with the amount and your uncle situation, so that helps. But the DA's office will need to review everything before deciding whether to file charges. Could be weeks, could be months." I nodded. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something like respect in her expression. "Good," she said. "People like your sister count on families staying quiet. The fact that you're not makes all the difference." I left the police station feeling lighter than I had in weeks. Not happy exactly, but clear, like I'd finally stopped carrying something that was never mine to hold. The fallout started almost immediately. My phone became a weapon of constant assault. Texts from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years telling me I was tearing the family apart. Voicemails from Diane's friends calling me vindictive and cruel. Someone created a fake social media account using my name and started posting about how I was a bitter, jealous person who couldn't stand to see my sister happy. Chloe showed me the account one morning before my shift. I reported it. It was taken down within 2 days, but the damage was done. People I'd gone to high school with, people who didn't know me at all anymore, were commenting on posts about what a terrible person I must be. George found me sitting on the back steps of my apartment one evening, staring at my phone with tears running down my face that I didn't remember starting. He sat down beside me, his knees cracking as he lowered himself. "They're coming at you hard," he said. "Yeah," I said. My voice sounded hollow. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Your Aunt Patty went through something similar. Not exactly the same, but close. When she finally told people your dad had been borrowing money from us for years, half the family turned on her, said she was airing dirty laundry, said she was being selfish. She almost backed down, almost let it go just to make the noise stop." "What made her keep going?" I asked. George looked out at the small patch of yard behind my building, where weeds grew through the cracks in the concrete. "She realized the noise was proof she was doing something that mattered," he said. "Comfortable lies don't make people angry. The truth does." I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I don't know if I can keep doing this." He looked at me. "Yes, you can, because you're not doing it for revenge. You're doing it because someone has to." I wanted to believe him. Some days I did. Other days I woke up and wondered if I should just drop everything, take the loss, move on with my life, and pretend none of it happened. Those were the days when George would make me toast and tea and sit with me while I ate, not saying anything, just being there, reminding me I wasn't alone. That was worth more than any amount of money. The preliminary hearing for the civil case was scheduled for mid-November. David Cardwell prepared me over the phone, walking me through what to expect. It wasn't a trial, just a hearing where the judge would determine if there was enough evidence to move forward. Diane and Kyle would be there with their own attorney. I should expect them to claim the money was a gift, not a loan. To say I'd given it freely without expectation of repayment. To paint me as someone who was now having regrets and trying to weaponize the legal system out of spite. "Can they win with that argument?" I asked. "Not if we present the evidence correctly," David said. "The text messages where your sister explicitly promises to pay you back are going to be crucial.
So is the billing documentation showing the surgery was already covered. The fundraiser is the icing on the cake because it shows a pattern of deception. The morning of the hearing, I put on the only suit I owned, a charcoal gray one I'd bought for job interviews years ago. It still fit, but felt strange, like wearing a costume. George insisted on coming with me. He wore a navy suit that was slightly too big on him now, his frame having shrunk over the years. We drove to the courthouse in Pittsburgh in silence. I parked in the public lot and paid the meter for 3 hours, hoping that would be enough. The courthouse was an old stone building with high ceilings and marble floors that echoed every footstep. We found the right courtroom on the 3rd floor. David Cardwell was waiting outside, a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and a briefcase that looked like it had been through a war. He shook my hand. "Ready?" "As I'll ever be," I said. He smiled. "That's usually enough."
Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying recently or for days. Kaya looked angry. His jaw was tight and his hands were clenched on the table in front of him. They didn't look at me when I walked in. I sat down at the plaintiff's table with David. George took a seat in the gallery directly behind me. The judge entered and we all stood. She was an older woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She sat, we sat, and she opened the file in front of her. "This is a preliminary hearing for Walsh versus Brennan," she said. Her voice was clear and no nonsense. "I've reviewed the initial complaint and the defendant's response. We're here to determine if there's sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. Mr. Cardwell, you may present your case." David stood. He was calm and methodical, walking the judge through everything. The phone call in September, the $16,000 transfer with the memo line, "For Emily," the text messages where Diane promised repayment, the billing records showing the surgery was covered by insurance, the photographs from the fundraiser with the banner and donation jar. He submitted everything as evidence, each document marked and entered into the record. The judge listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes. When David finished, she turned to the defense attorney. "Mr. Shaw, your response." The attorney stood. He was smooth and polished in a way that immediately made me distrust him. "Your Honor, this is a family dispute being mischaracterized as fraud. Miss Walsh gave money to her sister during a time of medical crisis. There was no formal loan agreement, no signed contract, no payment schedule. The money was a gift, given out of love and familial obligation. The fact that she now regrets that generosity doesn't give her the right to demand it back through the court system." David didn't even wait for the judge to ask. He stood again. "Your Honor, if I may, the text messages clearly show Miss Brennan promising repayment. Quote, 'We'll pay you back, I swear,' end quote. That's not the language of a gift. That's the language of a loan. Furthermore, the defendant's conduct after receiving the money, specifically hosting a fundraiser under false pretenses, demonstrates a pattern of financial deception." The judge held up a hand. "Mr. Shaw, do you have evidence that contradicts the billing records showing insurance covered the surgery?" Shaw hesitated. "We're still gathering financial documentation, Your Honor. The medical bills were complex and there were additional costs that aren't reflected in the summary provided by the plaintiff." "Such as?" the judge asked. Shaw flipped through his notes. "Physical therapy, home care equipment, prescription medications." The judge looked unimpressed. "Do you have receipts for these expenses?" "Not with me today," Shaw admitted. "Your Honor, we'd like to request a continuance to gather additional evidence." The judge leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Shaw, your clients have had 30 days to prepare for this hearing. The plaintiff has provided substantial documentation supporting her claims. Unless you can show me something concrete that contradicts that documentation, I'm inclined to allow this case to proceed." Shaw tried again. "Your Honor, the fundraiser was simply a way for the community to support the family during a difficult time. It wasn't fraudulent. It was an expression of generosity." "Was the community informed that the surgery was already paid for?" the judge asked. Shaw didn't answer. The judge looked at Diane and Kyle. "Mr. and Mrs. Brennan, did you disclose to the people who donated at your fundraiser that the surgery costs had been covered by insurance?" Kyle leaned over and whispered something to Shaw. Shaw stood. "They believed there were outstanding costs, Your Honor." "Believed," the judge repeated. "Did they verify that belief before soliciting donations?" More whispering.
Shaw looked uncomfortable. They were acting in good faith, Your Honor. The judge made a note. I'm not here to determine guilt or innocence, she said. That's for a trial. But based on the evidence presented today, I find there is sufficient cause to proceed. This case will go to trial. She set a date for January 15th. Court was adjourned. I sat there for a moment, not quite processing what had just happened. David turned to me. That went well, he said. We have a strong case. I nodded. I felt numb. George squeezed my shoulder from behind. You did good, kid. As we stood to leave, Diane suddenly pushed past her attorney and came toward me. Becca, wait, she said. Her voice was desperate. Please, can we just talk? There's nothing to talk about, I said. I kept my voice even. Just pay me back and this all goes away. We don't have it, she said. She was crying now, makeup running down her face even though she wasn't wearing any. We don't have the money. Then you should have thought about that before you stole it, I said. Kyle appeared behind her. You're destroying us, he hissed. His face was red. You're gonna take everything from us. You already took everything from me, I said. I looked at Diane. You took my savings? You took my trust? You took 2 years of my life that I spent working myself to exhaustion so I could have something, anything put away for emergencies. And you spent it on yourselves and then lied about it. So yeah, Kyle, I'm destroying you because you destroyed me first. Security was moving toward us. David put a hand on my arm. We need to go, he said quietly. I let him guide me out of the courtroom. George followed. We didn't look back. In the hallway, I finally let myself feel it. The weight of what had just happened. The fact that this was real now. There would be a trial, there would be testimony and cross-examination, and a verdict that would either validate everything I'd been saying or label me as the vindictive sister who couldn't let go. David must have seen something in my face because he said, "You're going to be okay. This is the hard part. Once we get to trial, the evidence speaks for itself." I nodded, tried to believe him. George and I walked back to the car in silence. The November air was cold and sharp, cutting through my suit jacket. I unlocked the car and we both got in, sat there for a moment in the parking garage with the engine off. You want to talk about it? George asked. Not yet, I said. Okay, he said. We sat there for a while longer. Then I started the car and we drove home. The next few weeks were strange. Life continued in its mundane rhythms while the lawsuit loomed in the background like weather you knew was coming, but couldn't quite prepare for. I worked my shifts at the diner, paid my bills, went to the grocery store and the post office, and all the ordinary places that felt surreal given everything else. People in town had heard about the lawsuit by now. Millbrook was small enough that news traveled fast, and gossip traveled faster. Some people were supportive. They'd nod at me in the checkout line or leave extra big tips at the diner with little notes that said, "Stay
Strong," or "You're doing the right thing." Others were cold. They'd turn away when they saw me coming or whispered to whoever they were with. I learned to recognize the difference in how people looked at me. Some saw a victim standing up for herself. Others saw a troublemaker who should have kept family business private. Thanksgiving came and went. George and I spent it alone in my apartment. I made a turkey breast and mashed potatoes, and we watched old movies on cable. It was quiet and small, and nothing like the loud, chaotic Thanksgivings of my childhood when the whole family would cram into my parents' house and argue about football and politics. I didn't miss it as much as I thought I would. What I had with George felt more real than any of those performances ever had. "We're doing all right," George said at one point, fork halfway to his mouth. "Just the two of us?" "Yeah," I said. "We are." Lauren reached out again in early December. She called instead of texting this time. I almost didn't answer, but I was glad I did. "I wanted you to know," she said, "that I told Diane I can't be her friend anymore. Not after what she did to you. And not after I found out she'd been lying to me, too." "About what?" I asked. "About a lot of things," Lauren said. Money she said she donated to the church that never made it there. A loan I gave her last year that she swore she'd pay back. I let it go because it was only $300 and I didn't want to make it a thing. But now I'm realizing that's how she operates. She takes a little from everyone and hopes no one compares notes. "I'm sorry," I said, "that she did that to you." Lauren laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound.
I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I should have believed you at the party. I did believe you. I just didn't want to admit my best friend was capable of that. We talked for a while longer. She told me about other people who'd started questioning things, small loans that were never repaid, fundraisers for causes that didn't quite add up, a pattern that became visible once someone finally said it out loud. When we hung up, I felt something shift. I wasn't alone in this anymore. Other people were waking up to what Diane had been doing. The truth was spreading in ways I couldn't control and didn't need to. It was simply existing now, out in the world, undeniable. The week before Christmas, I got a cashier's check in the mail. $8,000. No note, no return address, but the postmark was from Millbrook and the handwriting on the envelope looked like Trent's. I stared at it for a long time. It was half of what they owed me, a significant amount, but not enough. I called David Cardwell. "What do I do with this?" I asked. He thought for a moment. "Deposit it," he said. "Document that you received it and from whom. It doesn't mean you drop the lawsuit. They still owe you the other half, plus interest and legal fees. But it shows they're starting to take this seriously." I deposited the check, sent a formal receipt to Diane and Kyle through David's office. The receipt stated clearly that this was a partial payment and did not constitute acceptance of settlement or forgiveness of the remaining debt. 3 days later, another check arrived, this one for $4,000. Then a week after that, $2,000. By mid-January, 2 days before the trial was set to begin, they'd paid back 14 of the 16. I was still short $2,000 plus all the legal fees I'd racked up, which were now close to $5,000. David called me the night before the trial. "They're going to ask for a settlement," he said. "They'll offer to pay the remaining $2,000 plus a portion of your legal fees if you agree to drop the case." "What do you think I should do?" I asked. "That's not for me to decide," he said. "But I will say this. You've already won. You got your money back. You exposed what they did. If you proceed to trial, you might get a judgment for the full amount, including fees. But trials are unpredictable. Judges are human. They might look at this as a family squabble that got out of hand and split the difference. Or they might rule entirely in your favor. There's no way to know." I thought about it all night, barely slept, kept running through scenarios in my head. If I settled, it was over. Done. I could move on. If I went to trial, I risked walking away with less than I already had. But settling also meant Diane and Kyle never had to face real consequences, never had to stand in front of a judge and admit what they'd done. At 6 a.m., I called David back. "Let's go to trial," I said. He didn't argue. "All right," he said. "See you at 9. The trial was held in the same courtroom as the preliminary hearing. This time, the gallery was fuller. Lauren was there. Chloe had taken the day off to come. A few people from town I recognized but didn't know well. And in the back row, my mother. I hadn't expected her, hadn't even told her about the trial. But there she was, wearing a brown coat and a neutral expression that gave nothing away. Our eyes met for a brief moment. She didn't smile, didn't nod, just looked at me and then looked away. The trial itself was surprisingly quick. David presented the evidence again, this time with more detail and more context. He called me to the stand. I testified about the phone call from Diane, about the $16,000, about the party and the fundraiser and the billing records that proved it was all a lie. Shawcross examined me, tried to make it sound like I was bitter and vindictive, tried to suggest I'd given the money freely and was now having regrets. But I stayed calm, answered every question directly and honestly. The evidence spoke for itself. Diane took the stand. She cried through most of her testimony, said she was desperate, said she never meant to hurt me, said the fundraiser was a misunderstanding. Shawcross tried to paint her as a struggling mother who made a mistake under pressure, but when David cross-examined her, he was surgical. He asked her directly if she told me the surgery wasn't covered by insurance. She hesitated, then said yes. He asked if that was true. She said she thought it was at the time. He produced the billing records showing the statement was generated weeks before she called me, before she knew what insurance would cover. She had no answer for that. The judge asked her point blank if she'd verified the insurance coverage before asking me for money. Diane admitted she hadn't. The trial lasted 3 hours. The judge took a 15-minute recess to review her notes. When she came back, her decision was clear and unequivocal. I find in favor of the plaintiff. The defendant knowingly misrepresented the financial need for her daughter's surgery in order to obtain money from the plaintiff. The defendant is ordered to pay the remaining balance of $2,000 plus the plaintiff's legal fees in the amount of $4,800. Total judgment, $6,800, payable within 60 days.
Criminal charges. This kind of deception, especially when it involves vulnerable family members and public fundraising, cannot be tolerated. Court is adjourned. I sat there stunned. I'd won. Completely. Diane was sobbing. Kyle had his head in his hands. Their attorney was packing up his briefcase with quick, angry movements. David turned to me. "Congratulations," he said. "You did it." I didn't feel victorious. I felt tired. But also relieved, like I'd been holding my breath for months and could finally exhale. George was waiting for me outside the courtroom. He hugged me, his thin arms surprisingly strong. "I'm proud of you," he said. We walked out of the courthouse together. The sky was overcast and threatening snow. My mother was standing near the entrance, smoking a cigarette. She saw me and dropped it, ground it out with her shoe. "Rebecca," she said. "Mom," I said. We stood there awkwardly. Then she said, "You were right. I didn't think you were. I thought you were being stubborn and spiteful. But you were right, and I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." It wasn't the apology I'd wanted my whole life, but it was something. "Thank you," I said. She nodded, looked at George. "How are you, George?" "Still here," he said. "That's something." She smiled faintly. Then she looked back at me. "What are you going to do now?" I shrugged. "Go home? Go back to work? Live my life?" She nodded again. "If you ever want to talk," she said, "you have my number." "I do," I said. I didn't promise to call. She didn't ask me to. We stood there a moment longer. Then she walked away, back to her car, back to Florida, back to whatever life she'd built that didn't include me. I watched her go and felt nothing. Not anger, not sadness, just nothing. George touched my arm. "You ready?" "Yeah," I said. "Let's go home." The check for $6,800 arrived 30 days later. Certified mail. I deposited it, used $2,000 to pay off the last of my credit card debt, put the rest in savings. It wasn't the $16,000 I'd started with, but it was enough. George and I moved out of my cramped apartment in March, found a little house to rent on the edge of town, 2 bedrooms, a porch, a yard where nothing grew but weeds and wildflowers. It was quiet, peaceful. Ours. I kept working at the diner. George started going to a senior center twice a week for activities and coffee. We had dinner together most nights, talked about small things, the weather, what we'd watched on TV, plans for planting tomatoes in the spring. It was a simple life, the kind I'd never thought I'd want. But it turned out simple was exactly what I needed. Emily turned 10 in April. I sent her a card and a gift card to the bookstore. I didn't know if Diane would let her have it, but I sent it anyway. 2 weeks later, I got a card back. It was handmade, construction paper with glitter and stickers. Inside, in careful, looped handwriting, it said, "Thank you, Aunt Becca. I miss you. Love, Emily." I put it on the fridge. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did, if I think it was worth it to blow up my family over money. I tell them it was never about the money. It was about being seen, being valued, being told the truth for once in my goddamn life. And yeah, it was worth it. Every single bit. George and I sit on the porch some evenings, watching the sun go down over the Pennsylvania hills. We don't talk much, don't need to. We're both people who got tired of being used, who decided to stop, who built something small and true out of the wreckage.
That's enough. That's everything. Summer arrived with the kind of heat that made the air shimmer over the asphalt and turned my small rental house into an oven by mid-afternoon. George and I developed a routine of sitting on the porch until the sun went down, drinking iced tea that was more ice than tea, watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes in circles. It was peaceful in a way I'd never experienced before. No drama, no sudden phone calls demanding my time or money or forgiveness. Just the sound of cicadas and the occasional car passing by on the street. The criminal case against Diane moved slowly, the way everything involving the legal system seemed to. Lieutenant Brennan had called me in May to let me know the district attorney was reviewing the evidence. She said cases like this were tricky because family fraud occupied a strange gray area in the law. Prosecutors didn't like to get involved in what they saw as domestic disputes unless there was clear criminal intent and significant harm. But between my case and Uncle George's missing $5,000 and the testimony from 3 other people Lauren had connected me with who'd also loaned Diane money that was never returned, they had enough to consider charges. I told her I understood it might not go anywhere, that I had already gotten my money back, and that was enough. But Lieutenant Brennan had looked at me with those sharp eyes and said, "This isn't just about you anymore. Your sister has been running the same con on multiple people. That's a pattern. That's prosecutable. And if we don't stop it now, she'll just find new victims." So I waited, gave my statement to the assistant district attorney, a tired-looking woman named Monica Chen, who asked the same questions I had already answered a dozen times. She seemed genuinely outraged on my behalf, which was something. She told me they were likely to file charges for theft by deception and possibly wire fraud since some of the money had been transferred electronically. The penalties could range from probation to actual jail time, depending on how the judge felt about it. "Do you want her to go to jail?" Monica had asked me directly. I'd sat there in her cramped office with its overflowing file cabinets and fluorescent lighting and really thought about it. A year ago, I would have said no immediately. She's my sister. She's Emily's mother. But now, after everything, I found I didn't know how to answer. What I want, I'd said slowly, is for her to understand that actions have consequences, that you can't just take from people and expect them to smile and forgive and forget. If jail is what it takes for her to learn that, then yes. Monica had nodded and made a note. The charges were filed in late June. Diane was arrested at her home early one morning and released on bail the same day. I heard about it through Chloe, who'd heard it from someone who worked at the courthouse. Apparently, Diane had been hysterical, crying about how she couldn't go to jail because of Emily, how this was all a misunderstanding, how I was vindictive and cruel and orchestrated the whole thing out of jealousy. I felt nothing when I heard that. Maybe I should have felt satisfaction or vindication or even guilt. But all I felt was a distant kind of fatigue, like watching a storm from far away and knowing it couldn't touch me anymore. Trent showed up at the diner one afternoon. I was refilling the coffee station when I looked up, and there he was, standing just inside the door like he wasn't sure he was allowed to be there. He looked
Terrible. Thinner than I remembered, dark circles under his eyes, his usual easy confidence completely gone. I walked over with the coffee pot still in my hand. "What do you want, Trent?" "Can we talk?" he asked. His voice was quiet. "Please?" I glanced at Chloe behind the counter. She gave me a look that said, "I've got your back if you need me to throw him out." I set down the coffee pot. "5 minutes," I said. "Outside." "Sorry." Said she never meant to hurt anyone. Said she was just trying to survive. He paused. But she never actually took responsibility. It was all excuses. All reasons why she'd had to do what she did. Never just, "I was wrong. I'm sorry." I sat with that for a while. Then I asked the question that had been nagging at me. "What about Emily?" George's expression softened. Kyle was there. He's got custody while Diane's in jail. Emily was with him. She looked confused. Scared. George shook his head. That kid didn't deserve any of this. "No," I said. "She didn't."
I thought about Emily a lot in the weeks that followed. Wondered if she understood what was happening. Wondered if she blamed me. Wondered if, someday, when she was older, she'd want to hear my side of the story, or if she'd only ever know the version Diane told her. In October, I got a letter. It was addressed in careful handwriting I didn't recognize at first. The return address was Kyle's house. I opened it carefully. Inside was a drawing, crayon on white paper. A house, with a big tree. 2 stick figures on the porch. One tall, one short. At the bottom it said, Aunt Becca and me. I sat down hard on the couch, turned the paper over. On the back, in Kyle's handwriting, it said, Emily wanted you to have this. She misses you. She doesn't understand everything that happened, but she knows she loves you. If you ever want to see her, we can work something out. Diane doesn't have a say in it anymore. My eyes burned. I folded the letter carefully and put it in the drawer of my nightstand, next to the birthday card Emily had sent me months ago. I wasn't ready yet. Maybe someday. But not yet. Thanksgiving came around again. This time, George and I didn't spend it alone. Chloe invited us to her family's dinner, a chaotic gathering of aunts and uncles and cousins who all talked over each other and laughed too loud, and didn't ask us any questions about our past. It was exactly what I needed. To be in a room full of people who didn't want anything from me except to pass the mashed potatoes. To be just another face at the table, unremarkable and unburdened. On the drive home, George said, "That was nice." "Yeah," I said, "it was." "You think we could do that again next year?" he asked. "I think we could," I said. "Maybe we could even host." George smiled. "Look at you, making plans." I glanced at him. "Is that weird?" "No," he said. "It's good. It means you're healing." The seasons turned. Winter came with its bare trees and gray skies. George's Parkinson's got a little worse. His hands shook more. He moved a little slower. But he was still sharp, still present, still the person who sat with me in the evenings and reminded me that I wasn't alone. We celebrated Christmas quietly. I got him a new sweater and a puzzle book. He got me a necklace with a small silver bird on it. "Free," he said when I opened it. "That's what you are now. Free." I wore it every day. In January, I got a call from Monica Chen. She told me Diane was being released early for good behavior. She'd served 9 months instead of 18. Part of me was angry about that. She'd hurt so many people and she was getting out after less than a year. But another part of me just felt tired. Done. "I don't care," I told Monica, "as long as she stays away from me." "There's a restraining order in place," Monica said. "She can't contact you or come within 500 feet of you or your residence. If she violates it, she goes back to jail." "Good," I said. And I meant it. February brought the first signs of spring. Crocuses pushing up through the half-frozen ground, birds starting to sing again in the early mornings. George and I started planning our garden. We bought seed packets at the hardware store, tomatoes and peppers and herbs. We spent weekends turning over the soil in the backyard, pulling weeds, marking out rows. It was hard physical work, but it felt good, like we were building something. Creating, instead of destroying. One afternoon, while we were planting basil, George said, "You ever think about what you would have done different?" I sat back on my heels. "Different how? If you'd known then what you know now, would you still have given her the money?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "No," I said. "If I'd known she was lying, I wouldn't have given her a cent." "But that's not really what you're asking." George smiled. "No, it's not." Would I have been happier if I'd never found out the truth? If I just lived in ignorance and kept being the person my family used whenever they needed something? I wiped dirt off my hands. No, I said. I'd rather know. I'd rather have lost the money and gained my self-respect than kept the money and stayed blind. George nodded. That's what I thought. We finished planting in comfortable silence. That evening, we sat on the porch and watched the sunset. The sky was pink and orange and purple, colors so vibrant they almost didn't seem real. I thought about where I'd been a year ago. Broken, angry, terrified that standing up for myself would cost me everything. And it had cost me. It had cost me my family, or at least the illusion of family I'd been clinging to. It had cost me money and time and sleep and peace of mind. But it had also given me something I'd never had before. The knowledge that I could stand on my own, that I didn't need their approval or their presence or their love to survive. That I was enough, just as I was, without them. Spring arrived in full force. The garden started to grow, tiny green shoots pushing up through the dark soil. George spent hours out there, tending to the plants with the same careful attention he gave to everything. I joined him when I could, after my shifts at the diner. We worked side by side, not talking much, just being. In late April, I got another letter from Kyle. "Emily's doing better," he wrote. "She's in therapy, working through everything. She asks about you sometimes. I tell her you love her, but that grown-up stuff is complicated. She seems to accept that. There's going to be a recital at her school in May. She's playing violin. She wanted me to invite you. No pressure, just wanted you to know you're welcome if you want to come." I read the letter 3 times. Showed it to George. "What do you think?" I asked. "I think," George said slowly, "that kid didn't do anything wrong. And I think you miss her." "I do," I said. "So go. See her play her violin. Let her know you still care. You can do that without letting the rest of them back in." The recital was on a Tuesday evening. I took the afternoon off work, changed into a nice dress, drove to Emily's school with a stomach in knots. The auditorium was crowded with parents and grandparents and siblings. I found a seat in the back. Tried to make myself small. The lights dimmed. The kids filed out onto the stage in their concert blacks. And there was Emily. Taller than I remembered, her hair longer, but still my niece. Still the little girl I'd held when she was born. She played a simple piece, something classical I didn't recognize. She was tentative at first, her bow shaky, but then she found her rhythm and the music smoothed out, became something lovely. When it was over and
As they were taking their bows, Emily scanned the audience. Her eyes found mine. She froze for just a second. Then she smiled. A real smile, bright and surprised and happy. She waved. I waved back. After the recital, I waited in the lobby, not sure if I should approach or just leave. But then Emily came running over, violin case banging against her leg. "Aunt Becca," she said, "you came." "I did," I said. I knelt down so we were eye level. "You were wonderful." She blushed. "I messed up in the middle." "I noticed," I lied. "It sounded perfect to me." Kyle appeared, looking uncomfortable. "Becca," he said. "Hey, Kyle," I said. I stood up. "Thanks for inviting me." He nodded. "Of course. Emily's been asking." We stood there awkwardly. Then Emily grabbed my hand. "Can Aunt Becca come get ice cream with us?" she asked Kyle. Kyle hesitated. I could see him trying to figure out if that was allowed, if it would violate the restraining order or cause problems with Diane. "I should probably get going," I said. "I have work in the morning." Emily's face fell. "But you just got here." "I know, sweetheart," I said. But I'll see you again, I promise. She looked up at me with those big eyes. Really? Really, I said, and I meant it. I gave her a hug, she squeezed me tight. I love you, Aunt Becca, she whispered. I love you too, I said. Always. I left before I could cry. Drove home with the windows down and the radio off, just the sound of the wind and my own breathing. When I got home, George was waiting on the porch. How'd it go? He asked. I sat down next to him. It was hard, I said, but good. She's doing okay. George nodded. And you? I'm doing okay too, I said, and I realized it was true. Summer came back around. The garden flourished. We had more tomatoes than we knew what to do with. George made sauce. I made salsa. We gave bags of vegetables to the neighbors and to Chloe and to anyone who would take them. The house smelled like basil and oregano and fresh earth. I started seeing Emily once a month. Kyle would bring her to the diner and we'd have breakfast together, just the two of us. We didn't talk about Diane or the trial or any of it. We talked about school and her friends and the books she was reading. Normal things, safe things. Slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding something. It wasn't what we'd had before. It was different. Maybe better because it was honest. In August, I got a letter from Diane. It was forwarded through Monica Chen's office, so Diane didn't violate the restraining order by contacting me directly. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity won out. The letter was short, written on lined paper in Diane's looping handwriting. Becca, I know I don't have the right to ask for your forgiveness. I know I hurt you in ways I can't undo. I'm not writing to make excuses or to ask you to understand. I'm writing because my therapist says I need to take accountability. So here it is. I lied to you. I manipulated you. I used your love for Emily and your good heart against you. I told myself I had no choice, that I was desperate, that you'd be fine. But the truth is, I was selfish and cruel, and I destroyed something precious because I couldn't see past my own needs. I'm sorry. Not because I got caught, or because I went to jail, but because I hurt you, because I broke your trust, because I took advantage of someone who only ever tried to help me. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even know if I'd forgive me. But I needed you to know that I see what I did now, and I'm sorry. Diane. I read it twice. Then I folded it up and put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. Maybe I would someday. Maybe I wouldn't. But for now, it was enough to know that she'd said it, that somewhere in whatever process she was going through, she'd finally looked at herself clearly and admitted the truth. George asked me about it that night. You gonna write back? I don't think so, I said. You don't need to forgive her, he said. You know that, right? Forgiveness is for you, not for her. You get to decide if and when and how. I know, I said. And right now, I don't want to. That's okay, he said. That's more than okay. Fall came with its cool air and changing leaves. George and I raked the yard together, made piles and jumped in them like kids, laughed until our sides hurt. We hosted Thanksgiving this year. Chloe and her family came. Lauren came. A few people from town I'd gotten friendly with. We packed the small house full of people and food and noise. It was chaotic and messy and perfect. Uncle George said grace before we ate. He thanked God for second chances and found family, and the strength to walk away from people who don't see your worth. He thanked God for gardens and quiet mornings and nieces who show up even when it's hard. And he thanked God for me, for being stubborn and brave and unwilling to settle for less than I deserved. I cried a little, but they were good tears, clean tears. Winter settled in again. The year turned. George's health declined a bit more. He needed a cane now, moved even slower, but his mind was still sharp and his spirit was still there. We spent the cold evenings by the fireplace, reading and doing puzzles and watching old movies. One night in January, he said, I'm glad I got to see this. See you stand up. See you free. I'm glad too, I said. When I go, he said, don't you dare let them back in.
Don't you dare take what you've built here." "I won't," I promised. "Good," he said, "because you're the strongest person I know, and I need you to remember that when I'm not here to remind you." George died in March. Peaceful. In his sleep. I found him in the morning, still in his bed, looking like he'd just drifted off. The funeral was small. Just me and Chloe and Lauren and a few people from the senior center he'd been attending. I didn't tell my family. Didn't see the point. George wouldn't have wanted them there anyway. I buried him next to Aunt Patty, his wife, who'd stood up to my father all those years ago. Seemed fitting. Two people who'd loved me and taught me and shown me how to be strong. Together now, in whatever came next. I grieved hard. Missed him terribly. The house felt empty without him. But I didn't fall apart. I kept working, kept tending the garden, kept having breakfast with Emily once a month, kept building the life I had fought so hard to have. In April, I got a promotion at the diner, manager to assistant general manager. It came with a raise and health insurance and the possibility of eventually buying into the business as a partner. I said yes. Started thinking about the future in ways I never had before. Maybe I'd buy the diner someday. Maybe I'd open my own place. Maybe I'd do something completely different. The point was, I had options now. I had stability and savings and the freedom to choose. Emily graduated from elementary school in June. I went to the ceremony, sat in the audience and watched her walk across the stage in her little cap and gown. She was going to middle school in the fall, growing up fast, becoming her own person. After the ceremony, she ran up to me. "Did you see?" "I saw," I said. "I'm so proud of you." She hugged me. Then she pulled back and said, "I'm glad you're here. Even with everything."
I'm glad you're still here. Me too, kiddo, I said. Me too. I never fully reconciled with my family. Diane finished her jail time and her probation. She moved to another town an hour away. Started over. I heard through Emily that she was working at a grocery store, living in a small apartment, trying to rebuild. Trent and Vanessa got divorced. He moved back to Millbrook, got a job at the hardware store. We saw each other sometimes, nodded in passing, never really talked. Mom stayed in Florida. We exchanged Christmas cards, nothing more. And I was okay with that, because I'd learned something through all of this. Family isn't just blood. It's not just the people you're born to or the ones who share your last name. Family is the people who show up, who see you, who stand beside you when everything falls apart and don't ask for anything in return except that you keep going. George was family. Chloe was family. Lauren was family. Even Emily, in her own way, was family. The rest of them, the ones who'd taken and lied and used me, they were just people I used to know. And that was enough. I still live in the little rental house, still tend the garden every spring and summer, still work at the diner and save my money and plan for a future that belongs only to me. Sometimes I think about that day at Diane's house, standing in her yard with 30 pairs of eyes on me, demanding the truth, refusing to be quiet, refusing to let them get away with it one more time. That was the day everything changed. Not because I got my money back, not because Diane went to jail, but because I finally understood my own worth. Because I finally said enough. And you know what? I'd do it all again. Every hard conversation, every sleepless night, every moment of standing alone against people who were supposed to love me. Because on the other side of all that pain was something I'd never had before. Peace. Real, lasting peace. The kind that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone your silence. That you don't have to shrink yourself to make other people comfortable. That you're allowed to demand better and walk away when you don't get it. So if you're reading this, if you're in a situation where someone's taking advantage of you, using your love and loyalty against you, I want you to know something. You don't have to stay. You don't have to keep giving to people who only know how to take. You can stand up. You can say no. You can demand what you're owed and walk away from anyone who tells you you're wrong for doing it. It won't be easy. It might cost you people you thought you couldn't live without. But I promise you, On the other side of that fear is a version of yourself you've never met before. Stronger, freer, whole, and that person is worth fighting for. The years that followed taught me things I'd never expected to learn. That healing isn't linear, that some days you wake up angry all over again about things you thought you'd made peace with. That forgiveness isn't something you give once and it's done, it's something you choose over and over, or sometimes choose not to give at all. And both are valid. I learned that the absence of toxic people creates a space where you can finally hear your own thoughts, where you can figure out who you are when you're not constantly bracing for the next crisis or the next demand on your time and resources. Emily turned 13 the summer I turned 35. She'd grown into a thoughtful kid, quiet but observant, the kind of teenager who noticed things other people missed. We still had our monthly breakfasts, though now she ordered coffee instead of hot chocolate, and talked about books I'd never heard of and boys she thought were cute but would never admit it to her friends. One morning in late July, she asked me something I hadn't been prepared for. "Do you hate my mom?" I set down my fork, looked at her across the table at our usual booth in the diner. "That's a complicated question," I said. She waited. She learned patience somewhere along the way. "I don't hate her," I said finally, "but I also don't trust her, and I don't want her in my life. Does that make sense?" She nodded slowly. "Dad says you were really brave, for standing up to her, for not letting her get away with it." I smiled a little. "What do you think?" Emily stirred her coffee, watching the cream swirl into patterns. "I think it must have been really hard," she said, "to lose your whole family over money." "It wasn't about the money," I said gently. "It was about the lying, about being used, about realizing that the people who were supposed to love me only wanted me around when I was useful." She looked up at me then. Her eyes were so much like Diane's it sometimes hurt to look at her. But there was something different there too, something clearer, more honest. "I'm glad you didn't stay quiet," she said. "Because if you had, I wouldn't know that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when it's hard, even when people get mad at you for it." My throat tightened. "You're going to be okay, kid," I said. "You're going to be better than okay." The diner became mine in the fall. Chloe's parents, who'd owned it for 30 years, decided to retire and move to Arizona. They offered to sell it to me and Chloe as partners. We took out a small business loan, signed the papers, and suddenly I owned something, not just worked somewhere, owned it. We repainted the walls a warm yellow, updated the menu, kept all the things that made it feel like home. The worn booths and the vintage Coca-Cola signs and the jukeback that only played songs from the 70s. But we made it ours too. Added weekend brunch, started hosting open mic nights on Thursdays, became the kind of place where people came not just for food, but for community. I thought about George often during those early months of ownership. Wished he could see it. Wished I could tell him that the life he'd encouraged me to build had grown into something solid and real. I visited his grave sometimes, brought flowers, talked to him like he was still sitting in that recliner doing crossword puzzles, told him about Emily and the diner and the quiet satisfaction of days that belonged entirely to me. I liked to think he could hear me, that wherever he was proud. Lauren got married that winter, asked me to be a bridesmaid. I stood up there in a dress the color of winter roses and watched her marry a kind man who looked at her like she hung the moon. At the reception, she pulled me aside. "I never thanked you." "For what?" "For showing me that loyalty doesn't mean staying silent when someone's wrong. I spent years making excuses for Diane because I thought that's what friendship meant. But you taught me that real friendship, real love, means telling the truth even when it costs you." She hugged me tight. "You changed my life, Becca. I'm glad," I said, "because you helped change mine too." Spring arrived with its ritual of rebirth. I planted the garden alone this year. George's garden, I still thought of it, even though he was gone. The peppers and herbs that came back year after year because we'd chosen perennials, things that survived the winter and returned stronger.
Thinking about for a while, I wrote my story down. All of it. The betrayal, the investigation, the lawsuit, the aftermath.
everything. I wrote it not as a social media post or a legal document, but as a story. Something that might help someone else who was going through what I'd been through. Someone who needed to know they weren't crazy for being hurt, that they weren't selfish for demanding better, that standing up for yourself, even when it costs you everything, is worth it. I published it on a blog I created just for that purpose. Didn't use my real name, didn't share it with anyone I knew, just put it out into the world and let it exist. Within a week, I had comments. Dozens of them. People thanking me, people sharing their own stories of family betrayal and financial abuse. People who'd been made to feel guilty for setting boundaries or asking for what they were owed. I read every comment, responded when I could, built a small community of people who understood, who'd been through their own versions of what I'd survived. It felt good, purposeful, like maybe all the pain had led to something useful after all. Emily graduated high school at 18, got accepted to a good college 2 hours away, far enough to have independence, but close enough to come home when she needed to. I went to her graduation party, the one Kyle threw in the backyard of the house where everything had fallen apart years before. It felt strange being there, but also fine, like returning to a place that used to hurt and finding it had lost its power over you. Diane wasn't there. She lived 3 towns over now, had a new job, a new life. Minimal contact with Emily by her own choice. Emily had stopped trying to have a relationship with her mother around age 16, just quietly pulled away, focused on school and friends and building a future that didn't include the chaos Diane brought. At the party, Kyle pulled me aside. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For still being here. For Emily. She's had a lot of people leave or disappoint her. But you stayed. In your own way, on your own terms. You stayed. That matters." I nodded. She's a good kid.
Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just